Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1471 of the Locked on Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Thursday evening into Friday. And thank you for joining us, as always, on the podcast and making us your first listen each and every day. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're also on YouTube. And again, find us anywhere you get your podcasts. Today's show will be myself and Rafael Barlowe, an NBA draft expert, host of the Locked on NBA Big Board podcast, also runs NBA Big Board on the written side and has been covering the draft for quite a while. I was on the podcast last year and got a lot of rave reviews in this space. We talk about mostly the draft prospects that are not college players. That's sort of the conceit of this podcast because a lot of attention is always paid to the guys who play college basketball. It's a little bit easier to scout those guys. Rafael is always in the weeds, and yeah, they're big names too. You got Victor Wembanyama at the top of the board, and this year, I think more than any year previously, you have the G League Ignite program, you have Overtime Elite, lots of non-college prospects to get into, as well as the international prospects. So Rafael comes on and talk about a little bit of all of that stuff. The draft is rapidly approaching. We'll have much more draft content coming in the future. And as a reminder at the top of the podcast as well, I talked to Glenn Willis recently on the podcast, Tyler Jones, Brian Schroeder on the draft. I also did a mailbag podcast that dropped on Wednesday. So please subscribe, catch up on all that fun stuff. And without further delay, we'll have the intro. I'll be back with myself and Rafael Barlowe on the NBA draft.
You are Locked on Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I am joined for the second consecutive year by Rafael Barlowe, NBA draft expert here at the Locked On Podcast Network. Rafael, I appreciate you doing this, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, I mean, the word expert sounds like I have to be an expert, so I hope I live up to the title. But yeah, anytime you want me on, man, we can do this.
I said it so you didn't have to. I understand how this stuff goes. It's a little bit, it's not always comfortable to be called an expert, but you are one. I'll say that again. And I said it before I brought you in, but I feel like, it's not easy to talk about the college guys, but, there's just more talk about them in a lot of ways. I'm sure that is what you're familiar with too. But it's getting less and less like that. I was actually going to ask you that. Do you think I think maybe this year's perhaps the ultimate example when you have Vic and you have Scoot and you have Overtime Elite now being more covered? Does it feel like the non-college players are getting more attention, at least more mainstream talk than they have before? Because it kind of feels like that way to me at least a little bit.
I mean, there's two ways for me to answer that question. I do think this year is very unique and is different than any other year, but also from the perspective of someone that has that, like, my money is based off of content.
Yep.
And people being familiar with the players, it makes it tough because the average fan may not know or have seen any games of the top 5 picks in this year's draft.
True.
Right? So when does that happen? So even though Wembanyama is a big deal, you kind of had to go out of your way to watch him play. Like, you had to watch him play at 2:00 on the NBA app. I don't think people really watch Scoot Henderson. And I think even fewer people watch the Thompson Twins. So from like a content sales perspective, you would definitely prefer if all of those guys played college basketball and the average fan saw them in the NCAA tournament and so on. But yeah, this is a unique year. And like I said, I mean, we could end up having 5 guys selected in the top 5 that didn't play a single minute of college basketball.
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't thought about it the way you kind of put it, but it's right. I mean, I think the way you put it about having to go out of your way to watch these guys, because even with Victor, who I think most fans know by name, at least now, and kind of know what he's supposed to be, maybe saw his highlights, but I think probably the most people saw him was the games against the G League Ignite early, and that was months and months and months ago. I mean, because they were on in prime time, and basically they were on TV, and it was easy to follow those. But people haven't seen him since then. I mean, that's probably true. And I think Scoot, I'm from Atlanta, so he's probably a bigger deal here because he's from here, and I think there's a little bit more attention on him. But I wonder, people probably know the name, but yeah, the Overtime Elite for sure. I mean, I know people have never seen Overtime Elite play, so it's interesting, and that's part of why I wanted to have you on to kind of talk about these guys a little bit. Even though, like you said, most of the the top 4 or 5 guys are not going to be available for the Hawks. I get that. We'll talk about all the guys at 15 for months and months now, or weeks and weeks now. I do want to start at the top, though. I mean, I'm assuming this is the case. I've listened to your stuff, but I'll just tee it up. Where are you at on the Victor experience? Is he the guy that everybody thinks he's going to be? Broadly speaking, we don't have to spend too much time on him because I know you're talking about him all the time. But where are you on the is he the next blank scale on Victor Wembanyama?
Well, he better be. On my wedding day, me and my wife went to watch him play in Paris on my wedding day. So,
well, yeah, he better be for your own marriage. Yeah, that's a good point.
So, we ended up. We got married in Paris. We got married at the Eiffel Towers. Nobody, it was just me and my wife, and but we had to do it at like 6 o'clock in the morning, so just to make sure there was nobody in our shots in the photos. So 8 o'clock, I'm like, hey, there's this kid. I think he's gonna be the number one pick. You want to go check him out? And she's like, yeah. So this was last year. So it was actually November 2021, and he gets in foul trouble like the first,
of course,
like the first, I don't know, probably like 8 possessions of the game. And then this year, I actually went to Paris. I watched him play a couple of times, and then she saw him play in the Scoot Wembanyama game or whatever. So it made me look like a genius in a sense because she thought that I predicted this a year early, or really
you were the only one that knew this, right, back then. Yeah. That's funny.
So but no, all jokes aside, I mean, I think he's special, man. He's 7'5", he can handle, he can shoot. I'm friends with like some people that are really close to him. I've briefly met him. I mean, I know his agent pretty well. The thing that everyone says about him that is close to him is how focused and driven he is and how intelligent he is. And so I know that he's been preparing for the NBA for years. And I mean, that doesn't sound crazy because you can say everybody is, but he's been preparing for little things like to stay healthy, like his landing. I mean, he studied like all the big men that have had like foot injuries. And I know ESPN did like a little feature about everything that he does to get prepared for a game. I mean, the stretching he does, and he's just really preparing his body. And there was one particular play where he slipped on a sticker. And I mean, the way he fell looked like I would have tore my ACL, MCL, every CL. And he got right back up. So I was asking his agent, I said, were you concerned? Were you worried? He says, no, the kid is flexible and he's going to be okay. So I said all that to say this, that I think that on top of the crazy natural gifts and talent and work ethic, I think he's going to be special because his mindset is totally, totally different. Like he's literally stretching and preparing to stay healthy as an 18. I mean, he's been doing it since he was like 16 years old. And we all know when we were like 19, we didn't stretch when we played basketball. We just got on the court and so on. So I think that's what makes him really different is his mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen him, but not as much as you. I'm very sure about that. But he's, I suppose, and I'm like predisposed to resist hype. You know what I mean? Like, not that he's the number one pick in the draft. There's no question about that. I'm not saying anything otherwise. But you hear the next LeBron, the next whatever it is, and it's like, man, I kind of have to see it like on an NBA court. But with this one, I find myself not resisting as much. Some of it's like, what percentile outcome does it actually have to hit to be that guy? But I mean, I was trying to explain to my brother today, who actually is a high school coach who hasn't seen him play a lot. And I'm like, just picture this guy 7'4", 7'5", who can do these things that guys that size have never been able to do. And that's the simple pitch, right? I mean, am I crazy? If you're just telling somebody for the first time about him, like, give the size and combination of skills is kind of unforeseen. Like I've never seen it before. Have you? I mean,
I've never seen it. I mean, I'm too young to really, really remember like a healthy version of Ralph Sampson.
Yeah.
But Vic is 7'5", and I know it's easy to put him in a box as a center, but he may not be a 5. He may be a guy that can play 3, 4, and 5 in today's NBA. I mean, let's use Atlanta for example. Let's say he ends up in Atlanta. I think that you can play him next to Capella, next to John Collins, and even maybe play him at the threesome and just have like this crazy long lineup, especially if he can stretch the floor. I mean, I think he's fluid and agile enough to defend out in space, which I've seen like teams try to like put him out in space to take him away from the rim. And he's so long and athletic that even if he gets beat, I mean, dude has like a 7'9" wingspan. He can alter shots from behind. So that's just crazy to me that there's a guy that's 7'5" that you can put next to a traditional big, and I think you can feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild, really, when you think about it. And we don't have to keep doing this, but it's he's going to be scary, and the lottery is coming up in a couple days, and everyone's salivating over where he might end up. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every single player is a perfect fit for you. It is the same when it comes to the vehicle that you're driving around each and every day. Every part has to fit just right for things to operate at their highest level. So the next time you need parts or accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure that every single part that you need happens to fit right and does so the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that the part will be fitting for you or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when it comes to shopping on eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. And after all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are actually guaranteed for you. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. One more time, that is ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. I do want to ask you about the other top 5 potential guys in no order. I mean, you have the Thompson Twins, you have Scoot, and you know it's very interesting to me. Like, you know, the non-college guys. I'll just go broad with like, who do you have number 2 in this class? Because it seemed like for a long time it was kind of consensus Scoot, and I think it's still most of the people have him up there. But I wonder where you stand beyond Victor at the top.
Well, this is an Atlanta-based podcast, and I know Scoot is from Atlanta. Honestly, for me, I just go back and forth. I think the number 2 pick is honestly going to be determined by who gets the pick. I think if it's Detroit, and I got totally blasted on social media for saying this back in January. So it wasn't until some of the bigger publications mentioned that there's a chance that Brandon Miller can go number 3 that people thought I wasn't making a hot take. But I think if it's Detroit, it just doesn't really make sense to draft Scoot. I think Brandon Miller's a better fit. And I know people say, oh, you take best player available. But I think if you take the best player available and you don't put him in the best position to succeed, then you didn't get the best player available. I think if it's Houston or San Antonio, I think it can be a toss-up. I really do think the gap between Scoot and Brandon Miller is not as wide as people thought it was. And part of that is because I think Scoot he kind of took his foot off the gas in the second half of the season. And you could say Brandon Miller had an absolutely terrible NCAA tournament because he did. But Scoot's second half of the season, it's just like he took his foot off the gas. I mean, I still think people are really, really high on him, but I do think that could have closed the gap a little bit between him and Brandon Miller.
Makes sense. And I think that I am a little higher on Scoot, not because if he's from Atlanta. I've always liked what I've seen, but look, it's interesting. Like he got banged up this year. He didn't shoot it as well as people might have thought that he was going to shoot it at times. I mean, I guess the question is, let's say it's not Detroit. Let's say it's a team that has more of an empty canvas. What are some of the pros and cons of if you think that's sort of the debate between Henderson and Miller, or if you want to throw in a man or whoever you think who else would be there? Like, what's the thought process there? Like, what are you choosing between these guys? Like, what are you looking at when it comes to Scoot and Miller, and like, what are you valuing that high in the draft? Because even in a vacuum, like it's a top 3 pick in the draft. Like you have to be aiming for whatever you're aiming for.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe some front office will go with the versatility of like a Brandon Miller, someone that you can play at the 3, maybe close at the 4, who is till he got into that horrible shooting slump, was around 42% from 3 on 7 attempts per game. So if you're looking for someone that can possibly defend more positions, knock down open shots, and I think Brandon Miller has more to his game than he was able to showcase, because coming out of high school, I thought his greatest attribute was his ability to get to the mid-range, elevate over top of guys, and score out of the the mid post, but we didn't really get to see hardly any of that at Alabama, and they kind of made him like a 3-point shooter. But then he showed some flashes of being like a ball handler and pick and roll ball handler, decision maker. So if you like size in a positionless NBA, somebody that can guard multiple positions, then I think somebody may go with Brandon Miller. If you're just going with someone that you think can be the engine of your team and be like the quarterback and get in the lane and score and distribute, then you may go Scoop. So I really think it's going to be an acquired taste.
Yeah, and this will be the last thing I ask about this, but Scoot's not small. I'll say that. But where do you kind of stand? And this is obviously a Hawks podcast. They have a smaller point guard as their guy. Where do you philosophically stand on like the best player in your team or your number one guy being a sub 6'3", 6'4" guard, and how it's not. Sometimes you can't help it. It's just going to be what happened. That's where the Hawks are. Like they have this awesome player. He just happens to be 6'1". Yeah. Is that a differentiator? Like, do you care about that if you're a team at that high of a draft slot? Like if he's going to be your guy to build around, does it bother you that he's 6'2" or whatever he is?
No, I mean, we can even look at the 2018 draft. I mean, conventional wisdom is you take DeAndre, Trae Young. Well, yeah. I would take Trae Young over DeAndre in any of the other week fights on Sunday.
Agreed.
So I do think that you just can't always just use the size as the final reason for choosing a guy. I mean, like I said, Trae Young is one of the best examples. He does not pass the eye test at all. But you put him in an arena with some butts in the seats and lights on, he's probably going to outplay whatever 6'7" wing or guy that was selected over him. Now, yes, the defensive side can cause some issues, but on one hand, Trae has already been to the conference finals. The best player on the team, and he did it early in his career. So I think that, there's some stuff going on behind the scenes there a little bit, but I just think that there's some teams that wish they didn't pass on Trae Young, and they used his size against him.
Yeah, no, it's a good point of reference, and obviously Hawks fans are going to be nodding along with what you said for sure. We talked about earlier how like it's a lot of people even more so than the G League Ignite or Wembanyama like have not seen the Thompson Twins in Overtime Elite, and they're kind of the men of mystery in this draft in a lot of ways. Like you hear about, I've seen them play, not as much as some people have, but you hear about their traits and how crazy athletic they are and all this stuff. And then they're, all this stuff. I wonder what you think about both of them. And I don't want to necessarily, they get grouped together all the time. I'm not meaning that on purpose. It's just kind of the way it is. They're twins and it's just natural. But Number one, do you see a difference between the two? How do you value them? And also what are you getting for someone who's never seen these guys play before? What should they expect?
They're the most, and I didn't realize this until probably a couple of days ago. I think they are the most divisive players in this draft. Earlier in the year, I think it was Brandon Miller. Yeah. But now, I think it's the Thompson Twins by a wide margin because, everybody agrees that they're extremely athletic. Amin is probably a top 1% athlete in the NBA. Some of the stuff that they do from athleticism standpoint is just ridiculous, but they can't shoot. The shooting numbers are pretty. They're pretty. They're pretty abysmal.
It's bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Even like you look at the free throw percentage, it's below 70. I want to say they shot like around low 30s on jump shots combined. And even though Ausar is considered the better of the two, he still is. Not really a reliable shooter. And then there are a lot of people that just feel like they're 20 years old and they played in a high school league. I saw a lot of comments on social media a couple of days ago about how are these guys going top 5 or whatever, and they average 16 points a game in a league of guys that are 17, 16, 18 years. So basically guys 2 years younger than them. But you can't deny the talent. You can't deny that both are really good passers that have good court vision and just the defensive potential. So I think that they, on one hand, they benefit for somewhat being unknown And then on the other hand, I think it's going to be a huge adjustment for them. I mean, it's a huge adjustment for any rookie going to the NBA, but I think theirs is going to be significantly bigger than the rest. But luckily for them, I think they have the tools defensively to at least be able to be, to contribute on the defensive end once they learn like the nuances of NBA defenses.
Yeah, I think that tracks. You mentioned what I kind of think too. Like, Ausar is the one it's considered to be a little bit lower upside, generally speaking, however you want to frame that, but a little bit more, probably because of the shooting, maybe a little bit more ready. I don't know. Amen is like a nuclear athlete beyond measure. Like that's the thing about like both of these guys they're really athletic. So you mentioned the defense. That's where I would get really excited about both of them. But the shooting is the big question, and the age is interesting too. I mean, that's sort of maybe more of a niche NBA draft conversation that I think I've heard too. But like they are 20, they're older than guys that are usually like coming out with this kind of profile, as raw as they are in some respects. But I mean, I've seen people that I trust that think Amen might be the second best prospect in the class. I don't know if I would go that far, but as far as upside, like if you think he's that 100th percentile athlete, which he might be. And Ausar not far behind that. And they're also the wing size, switchable, powerful. Everybody wants these guys. So I guess the one question I'll ask you is like, what happens if they can't ever shoot? You know what I mean? Like, because that's really the thing. Like in my mind, if I'm a GM, I'm like, all right, we have to hope they're going to shoot for obvious reasons. But if you're taking them in the top 5, you got to think about what happens if they don't, because that's kind of scary.
Yeah, I think that one, if they can't shoot and they don't pan out, it's going to be hard for overtime to recover from that because it's a league that, I mean, it's new. So people are always going to have doubts about something that's unconventional and brand new. If they succeed, then I think it's a big win for overtime. If they don't, they get off to slow starts. Then I think that despite, the good things that overtime has going on there, I think it can be used as a negative recruiting tool. But if they do not develop as shooters, then I think both have to be ball handlers.
Yeah.
I think that if like Ausar is playing off the ball, especially like in the playoffs, you watch the playoffs now and you see how much different it is than the regular season. If he's someone that is not a floor spacer and he's not the primary ball handler, he's just going to clog up the lane and just make things difficult for his teammates, unless he's like a phenomenal cutter. But even if he's like a really, really good defender, I mean, you look at Jared Vanderbilt for the Lakers, he is a very, very good defender, but there are times that on the offensive end, he's basically making it so LeBron can't turn the corner because they're sagging off of him. So I think that I don't think it's all doom and gloom if they don't develop into league average shooters, but I do think that they will both have to play off the ball, and you just have to find ways to have them basically score, like kind of getting downhill and in transition. And I think it'll hurt them in the playoffs where things slow down a little bit, but the shooting is the major swing skill, and I do think it is a little bit concerning. And it's crazy in this whole NBA draft world where 20 years old is like, it's kind of used against you. But I do think it's a little bit concerning that they did not improve, at least in my opinion, they did not improve as shooters from last year to this year. And if they did improve, it was very, very gradual.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm with you 100%. Like you have to be able to either if they're not capable of running the show or at least being capable on-ball players and you can't shoot, that's when you get into some disastrous scenarios in the playoffs, and that's what matters at the end of the day. You can team build all you want to, but that is what they'll be, especially potential top 5 picks. That's what they'll be judged on down the line. I do want to ask you about some guys a little bit further down some boards. I'll actually ask you this in 2 parts, and that might be the same player, so you can tell me that. Who is the highest rated guy that we've not talked about that's a non-college player? So either international or Ignite or Overtime. And also part 2 of that is, who is your favorite prospect? Maybe the guy that you like more than everybody else does that's a non-college prospect. It could be the same guy, so that's okay too.
I would say Bilal Coulibaly, which is Wembanyama's teammate.
Yeah, Vic's teammate. Best known as Vic's teammate. I feel bad about saying that, but that is what he's best known for right now, at least today.
Yeah, but you know what? It's a crazy story. I first saw him play January 2022, and in France they have like, it's almost like high school. You got the varsity game, you have the JV game, and the JV game is called the Espoirs League. It's like an under 21 league, and their games are like at 5 o'clock. So I went to the game, and I actually sat next to Mike Schmitz, who was with Draft Express, who's now with the Portland Trailblazers. Sat next to Mike. We were talking. We were watching the game, and he made a few plays. We're like, okay, who is he? So it's not like they have like a roster. So we're both on like Eurobasket trying to figure out who this kid is. How old is he? And we thought like, okay, man, this is somebody that we need to pay attention to for a couple years from now. Well, fast forward to last summer of 2022, he played on the French national team as the under 18 team that had like City Sissoko and I mean a good France team. Didn't put up big numbers, averaged like 7 points a game, but you saw the progression of how he's progressed from January 2022 to August 2022. Fast forward. September, I go to Paris to watch Victor. Obviously, it's not. I'm not gonna sit here and say I took a trip to Paris to watch Barlowe. And I watched the under 21 game, and I see a totally different player. I see a guy that's confident. He's a wing shot blocker. I mean, he has a 7'2" wingspan. He's athletic. He's taking the ball coast to coast. He's cutting. He's finishing. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, he's gonna be a first round pick in 2024. A few days later, they had the big scoop. Wembanyama showcase in Vegas. I was there. He got a couple minutes, but he looked lost. Looked really, really lost. And people probably don't even remember him playing in that game. That's just how.
Yeah, I barely do. And I was, I knew who he. I kind of had heard about him a little, but yeah, I barely. I watched that tape again recently because I knew he played, and I'll raise my hand. I have no recollection of him playing in that game at all. Really.
Yeah, I think he had a couple of turnovers, and then there were some injuries that just kind of opened some playing time, and then he started putting up these games where he had double figures. Then he's making these wild plays, cutting to the basket. He's finishing, blocking shots. He's switching out, and then it started to look like, okay, maybe he could come out in 2023. But it's like, nah, if he stays in, he's going to be, projected lottery pick in a weaker 2024 class. So I said all that to say this. His trajectory over the last 18 months has been incredible, to the point where I think he can actually creep up into the back end of the lottery because he's 6'8". He's, like I say, he has a 7'2" wingspan, has the ability to defend multiple positions. The shot is improving according to Synergy, and the stats are totally different from Synergy to like Real GM. But according to Synergy, he's shooting 43% from three, not a heavy volume of attempts, but the shot is improving. And if he continues to make strides like he has over the past 18 months to a year, then I think that somebody may say, okay, this is worth the lottery pick. I like him as far as international guys. I like City Sissoko. Played in the G League. So, I mean, he's international, played in the G League. Yeah. But I think Leonard Miller is going to be someone that could definitely rise around draft time. He's 6'10". He was absolutely awful at the combine last year.
Like legendarily so. Yeah, he got a lot of negative reviews for the combine.
Oh my gosh, year. he was awful. He looked so out of place. And I talked to his agent. He was like, "Yeah, we put him out there just to see what he had and what he was made of." And similar to Barlowe, he has had a crazy, crazy rise over the last year. And even like at the beginning of the G League season, he was okay. And I actually witnessed the game where he had 20 points, 20 rebounds. I think in March, he finished averaging like in the month of March, he was averaging like 23 points, 13 rebounds, like an assist, a block, 2 steals, shooting like 60% from the floor. So I think that he could be someone that ends up being really, really special. And he didn't show like the point forward game that we thought he was going to show this year. He kind of adjusted his game to like a dunker spot big. Mm-hmm. And he's a good passer. It's weird. He's a good passer, but he may not be a great decision maker yet. Like he has the vision. You can see, but I think if he puts it all together, he could be really good. So that's a long answer, but I would say between Barlowe and Leonard Miller, those are probably like my two favorite non-college players in this draft.
Yeah, I was going to ask about either one of them, so it works out great. I mean, and I was I'm not surprised in a bad way about Barlowe creeping into the back half of late part of the lottery, because the Hawks are 15. This is a Hawks podcast at the end of the day, and I was going to ask, like, if you think anybody would be in their range. And Miller, I think, if just kind of scanning the consensus mock stuff, he's probably the highest one that's most of the time in there. You got Sissoko. Some people like Sissoko, some people like Barlowe, some people like Ryan Repair. Like, yep. It's kind of all over the place. But I guess put your Hawks hat on for a moment, knowing a little bit about them at least. Like, anybody stand out to you as like an interesting fit there for what they already have? I mean, they're going to be in a period of transition. I think on some level they're going to probably make some trades and all that stuff. So it could be sort of open. But they pick 15, so it's that weird middle range, post late lottery, middle of the first round. Anybody stand out to you as like a potential guy that interests you that early for the Hawks?
Ooh, that's tough, because I feel like, and this is no knock on the Hawks, and I feel like I said this last year. I'm an agent.
Yeah,
I'm looking at this team, and it's like, where can my guy come in and get minutes?
And probably the answer is probably nowhere, to be honest. At the moment, that could change before the draft, or even on draft night. But yeah, I actually had this conversation with an agent recently of, I won't say anything else about that, but it was like, hey, they kind of asked me, like, so what do you think about the Hawks? Like, are they going to be consolidating or what? Because you look at this roster and it's 10, 11 deep of guys, and they're all under contract. And it's like, well, not they're good. It's at 15. Agents are not going to be actively steering guys away from Atlanta. I wouldn't imagine. It's still a good first round landing spot. But you're right. I mean, it might be more of a project spot. At least they can't. That's sort of the other side, is that they can afford to maybe be a little bit slower on a guy like that might need more time. They don't need the guy to play right away. So maybe that's the other side of it.
Yeah, that makes it tough for an agent, because it's like, right. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
I want my guy to get this second contract. I mean, Ryan Repair would be interesting. Atlanta's tough for me to. It's tough because, one, I think Trey is. I mean, the rumors about him being moved possibly, I think that's a little smoke.
Yeah.
I think DeJounte is going to be there. Bogdan is like a personal friend of mine. So
great dude. Everybody loves Bogey around here. He just signed again, so he's going to be here for a while, it seems. Yeah.
The nicest guy in the world. He is a really nice guy. Then you look at Jalen Johnson's there. You look at AJ Griffin. You still have Hunter. So I'm like, okay. So then, like, I even look at, like, how many teams in the NBA? I live in Dallas. Like, Dallas could use Okongwu, like, really bad, or Capella. So it's tough because it's hard to find minutes. Then if you want to go on someone that you can develop slowly, I think Ryan Repair could be an option. Ryan's working out here in Dallas. I've been to probably 10 to 20 of his workouts. He's kind of thrown into this box as this 3-and-D guy, but I think he's more than that. I know, like, this was his first year playing professional basketball, so he played in the Australian League, but played in New Zealand, and they put him as like this, basically 3-and-D guy. But just being around him and watching his film prior to going to New Zealand, he was a point guard. He was a guy that played the 1, the 2, could handle a little bit, was a decent passer. And I think he could be someone that if they want to kind of bring along slowly, then I think he could be an option. There are some concerns about the shooting, but he missed maybe 2 months of the season with like a broken wrist. So I think he's a better shooter than the numbers indicate. I think the numbers say he's like a 28% shooter from 3 or something like that. So he's someone that could be an option there in that range. Some may think it's a little high, but we're talking, I think he's 6'6" with like a 7'3" wingspan.
Yeah.
And he's known for his defense. He's a very active defender. So if Atlanta wants a guy that can defend, then I think that's always going to be an option when you have Trae Young. And I think that could be someone that they could strongly consider.
Yeah, he's been on my radar too for that same reason. I started hearing about him a little bit more in the middle of the season, especially when it felt like the Hawks are going to be sort of in that middle first round range, and all these guys are conceivably in their range. I got a question today about Sidi Sissoko from a Hawks fan. It was just like, hey, this guy looks interesting. I'm like, yeah, he's he's interesting. Like these guys are all certainly, and I made this point before, but the list has got to be 20 long for the Hawks to be considering. I'm not saying heavily considering by the time you get to the draft, but right now, yeah, take a wide lens. Look at all these guys.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of players flying out of Hartsfield Airport.
Oh yeah, I can guarantee you that for sure. I'm going to let you go, but one more question while I have you. Take advantage of your expertise. I'm worried. I'm thinking about like maybe a deeper sleeper guy that you like. For instance, the Hawks have a second round pick. It's like 46 overall. That kind of thing. Maybe an undrafted guy. Is there anybody deeper that you might like we have not talked about so far that may not be a first rounder, but you think has NBA real potential?
From the international pool?
Yeah. Well, I mean, or if you want to go anybody, I'll open it up to you go wherever you want to. Who's your guy deeper in this class?
I think, and I'll go back international. I think Nikola Drisic is interesting. He's Serbian. So it sounds stereotypical in a sense, but when you get a Serbian, you're talking about someone that is probably not a great athlete, but they can dribble, shoot, and pass and make good decisions. And Drisic is, he's Serbian like Bogdan, but he is a little bit bigger. He's physical. He's a good shooter. He's a shot maker, high IQ. He can pass. He actually played against the Thompson Twins earlier this year when the Thompson Twins went on a tour. And I want to say he had like 26 points and like 4 rebounds, 4 assists in that game. And so there are some people that feel like he outplayed them. He would be very intriguing, especially as a draft and stash guy. Best case scenario, he's like he's maybe like a Gallinari type player.
Okay.
So
young Gallo kind of, what he can still move
Gallo,
a little bit.
Physical, yeah. Kind of physical. I mean, I guess you can't say Gallo is known for being physical, but he had the body type to be physical. But Drisic is physical. He likes to initiate the contact. Does have that toughness. I don't know what it is in the water in Serbia, but the Eastern Europeans, they're pretty tough. So he would be intriguing. There's another guy, Ousmane Ndiaye. He is from Senegal. He played in Germany this year. Unfortunately for him, I think he had some visa issues, so he wasn't able to play in front of the NBA scouts All-Star weekend at the Basketball Without Borders, but he has like the length and he shows promise as a shooter. Has a long ways to go. He played like second division Germany last year. And I mean, I think he's more so of a really long-term prospect and project, but I think Atlanta does have the luxury. It's weird. You have a team that's like right outside of the lottery, but on the other hand, you say they have the luxury of being patient. So he could be an option there too.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm of the mind where there's 2 different things you can do in second rounds in particular. Is that you can try to get guys that might be able to help you deep bench during the season quickly, or you go the other way and you aim for a guy for 3 years from now. There's kind of no reason to go in between those 2 things. It's like one or the other, and we'll see what they actually end up doing. They could sell the pick, but the second round, as you well know, it gets really interesting after about 45. It's like, all right, every man for themselves, and agents want to have their guys be not drafted after a certain point. It's always a battle royale that last hour or so of the draft. But anyway, I appreciate all the time you've given us here on a Thursday evening. Please plug everything that you got going on. I know you're a busy man, especially right now as you're, I think, going to the combine pretty soon and all that fun stuff. So what's going on, and where can people find all your work?
Well, first of all, I appreciate your draft knowledge. There's times, and it's not a knock on other hosts. I mean, they're so busy covering their team, but they absolutely know nothing about the draft. And obviously, you're a draft guy.
I do love the draft. I have to do a little draft. I'm not on the level of you. I'm probably not where I was a few years ago as far as how much I pay attention, but I do love the draft. I can't get enough of it. Probably my favorite day of the year. That's just one of those things. So as soon as the Hawks lose, it's like, all right, shift change. We're definitely diving in, and I try to do enough to be dangerous until then. So
I know a draft guy when I see one. You're definitely a draft guy.
I appreciate it.
But you can find me at NBABigBoard.com. It is a newsletter. It's behind the paywall, but it's exclusive content. I have some relationship with some players and agents. There's some things that I can provide that you probably won't be able to get, elsewhere. I have, by the time this episode drops, I have like a YouTube video. It's an interview with Gigi Jackson and Cason Wallace where I sat down and talk to them. Interesting relationship with Case. And I can't say relationship is probably not the best word to use, but to make a long story short, I was his team videographer when he was a 5th grader.
Oh, wow. There you go.
So I have footage of him when he was in 5th grade, and then going back at that footage, there's like Keontae George where they're playing against Keontae George. There's a game where he's playing against Derek Whitehead. I didn't even know it was Derek until Keontae told me. So I do have some pretty cool relationships with some players. And then just the relationships I've been able to develop with agents and front office guys, I'll be able to provide some intel. So NBABigBoard.com. And then there's the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. That's 5 days a week. And it's like our season now, right? So, it's like in January or not even January, November, we're sitting there talking about the draft and people are, who cares? And now it's like, all right, everybody wants to know, like, okay. So now we're probably going to have to start repeating episodes that we did back in December. Mm-hmm. But 5 days a week, it's the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. I got a good group of co-hosts, and we're looking to bring you some really good content.
Yeah, absolutely recommend that at the highest level. Check out the newsletter as well. I appreciate you again for coming on and giving me some time in the midst of a busy season, so it does not go unnoticed. As for everybody else, please subscribe to this podcast as well, and we'll see you all next time.